This afternoon's first panel the focus is going to be on veterans transition. So to left and right, we have, I'll start with the left, we have Alex, Sue, Jim, and Mike, and they've been gracious enough to join and share with you their stories of transition, some very recent, some have transitioned a while ago, and each have a unique story to tell. And part of that story, is meant, as I talked to the mentors last night, to share kind of the tribal knowledge, the military subculture being a tribe in and of itself, which is the reason why many organizations have veteran ERG employee resource groups or opportunities to connect with MVP vets to share their stories, their experiences, and bring additional diversity and make their work culture more inclusive of the veteran population because of the skills and talents they bring. So working now back from right to left, my right, your left. We'll start with Mike, and I'll just go down the line and just share a little bit about who you are, what you do here at Abiomed, what branch you served in, how long, and where you see yourself going here. So go ahead, Mike.
Sure, yeah. I'll start off with what branch. So I was Army, Field Artillery, 13 Alpha. I had 2 deployments. And then in about 2015, I kind of made the decision that I wanted to get married and have a family. So I got out. I started here at Abiomed, which was a great job. I started as a supplier engineer, which was a really great opportunity to kind of learn how the business works, get to see other suppliers and bring that in. And then from there, actually, a couple of years later, I actually took over the supplier engineering team. This company's growing, which is a great place to be. And so I was able to take advantage of that. And I recently just moved over to the production manager position here at Abiomed, where ECA 4 is kind of like my space now. So that clean room that you just looked at is that space. So been here for a total of 4 years. It's been a great transition. I've had a lot of help from other veterans. And my manager at the time when I first came over was actually an Air Force guy. Huge help. So that's just a quick overview of who I am.
Thanks, Mike. Jim?
I am an Air Force veteran. I spent 12 years active duty and then the rest of my time in the reserves. I started out as a navigator on a KC-135, so I basically got to travel all over the world. And then for my rated supplement, which is the non-flying job that everybody on an aircrew has to take, I ended up commanding a security police squadron. And from there, I got out. And my transition was a little bit different because I got out back in '95, so they didn't have then what we have now. But basically, I got out. I had 2 jobs in the civilian world. Then I came to Abiomed in 2001. And I'm in human resources, and I've been here for 18 years.
Thanks, Jim. Sue?
So, geez, where to start? Sue Davis, current position here at Abiomed is SAP Business Analyst. I've been here for about 8 months. I never envisioned I'd go into the IT world. I was cryptology in the Navy for 20 years. And when I exited the military, it's very different architecture now. Back then it was job fairs, going to places online and looking at what jobs were available. Now, there's too much information, actually. Glassdoor, LinkedIn, all these different things. But I started out in the quality manager role when I left the military, and it was a very easy transition for me to see the handling of classified material and the handling of a regulated industry product. And I did that for a couple of years, and more than a couple of years. I've been retired since 2005. And I got involved in SAP, which I don't know if any of you have ever used it. It's our business operating system, and I've kind of migrated completely to the IT realm and business operating system. So it's been a good fit for me.
Thanks, Sue. Alex?
So my name's Alex. I'm a principal software architect here at Abiomed. Been here for about 2.5 years. You guys heard about the Impella Connect. I'm the cloud architect on that, to say it as simple as possible. In the military, I was in the Air Force. I did munitions. So I dealt with my hands and broke my back every day. working between 12 to 16 hours a day. I was in right after high school, about a week late. Once I got out, I said, I don't mind working this hard, but I don't want to work with my hands every day. I want to make sure that when I'm older, I can actually be walking. So I started going to school. A few months later, started off in summer, did a summer class at Salem State down the street from here. Did my undergrad in 3 years, going straight through. From there, I just got my first time job in the med tech business, getting first introduced to it. And then from there, I took some time, a year off, started my master's program, and also got married, had some kids, and finished up my doctorate a couple years back, all while working full time. So I just kept going and keep moving.
Awesome, thanks. I think a couple of the skills that we heard, and Mike really hit this home. I think through some of the Q&A was a commitment to lifelong learning, and I think I heard a trend across the board here from everybody that as you made the transition, you made a commitment to fully immerse yourself as much as you did when you were within the profession of arms at whatever position and level. And so that being said, as you learn more, and we've had a lot of briefings this morning about the industry, what do you think in your transition, I'll start with Alex and work back across the line, what do you think were the most transferable skills that you would have acquired beyond the pursuit of lifelong learning within the military? And I'd ask for each to come up with something different. So there's a tough one to begin with that you found was in immediate demand within the industry as you transitioned.
So for mine, it was more about education, but the biggest thing I'd say is grit. Just stick it through, just keep going. That's the one thing that I kept going with, because I'd see other students failing, and I was like, I don't care if this takes me 14 hours to learn, it takes you 2. I'm just gonna keep going, keep sticking it through, because I said, I know what's out once I complete this task. Once this is over, I know I'll be in a better spot. And I just kept going, and I still do that today.
So I refer back to my days in the Navy, and I've always been in a support service role. And I always say care and feeding of those around me, taking care of what's going on. And I'm in that same role now today within Abiomed and helping out to fix issues or educate people on how to use the system.
One of the things I learned in the service was discipline and looking out for each other on an air crew, on a team. And coming here, I had the opportunity to put that into practice. It wasn't what I did in the service. It wasn't a flying or a security police squadron, but here it's a different kind of team. But you still have the opportunity to make a commitment. You understand what goals are. You understand what discipline is. You understand what commitment to a different, it's a different lifestyle, but you have kind of a head start on it because you've already been through it once in a different way. And it's a much easier, it makes your transition a lot easier, having been in the service.
I think for me, the military did a great job at moving me around to different positions. I know in the Army, it was like, if you spend more than 18 months as a platoon leader, that's outrageous. So there was that mindset that I took with me where I'm not going to be in this job probably forever, and I need to learn as much as I can about how the rest of the organization works and be able to apply that. You see a lot of people in the industry get kind of siloed. They're focused on their job. They're not too worried about how the rest of the organization functions. But coming from the Army over, I kind of knew I need to understand the whole picture, and I need to be willing to learn different sectors of the business in order to be successful and bring it together. So that was kind of the mentality that I brought with me from the military that I think helped me be a little more successful.
Great. I mean, some of the key themes, as I take a couple of notes here for my own benefit, because I'm constantly learning, and I appreciate everyone sharing their stories, cross-functional and looking at things from a holistic, seeing the forest through the trees and how you can provide that value and continuous value into the organization. The commitment and discipline, these are just basic values. I think that every service, if you were to organize all 5 across the board, you will see either selfless service or commitment as one of the core values. We talked about the art of leadership, and I think if I haven't already used this quote before, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. There's science and there's books that can help educate and inform us about how to lead, And I think Mike talked about how in Abiomed's Heartbeat, they have lead and manage. There is a distinct difference in the corporate world. And we talked about making sure people know how much you care and checking in on them. That's something that's innate to a service member. Because if the person to your left or right doesn't know that you care, that you're not going to have their back, it makes an immeasurable difference. And I see that day in and day out. Those are the organizations with thriving cultures, not ones that are just surviving and focused on the bottom line. And the last one was about perseverance and grit. Another key trait, maybe not listed as a soft skill earlier in the why, but something that there's no obstacle too difficult, no task too great. Veterans overcome those while they're in uniform, and you have that same knowledge, skill, and abilities to do that and transition that into the workforce. So thanks for sharing those. Maybe hopefully I paraphrase them, a little bit, and I appreciate you sharing that. So I'll again start from my right, your left, and hit Mike. So tell us a little bit more about your deliberate planning in your transition. And you talked about 2015 for you, and you made a decision, and it was talked a little bit by Mike, and I think Todd asked a question earlier about balance. And so one of the key themes I heard you discuss earlier, Mike, was about the operational tempo was precluding me from establishing 5-10-year goals for you. And so could you kind of share with maybe your deliberate plan as you looked at it, because we've got a 21-day search model out there. There's all these different search engines and tools that can assist, but at the end of the day, you had a plan that effectively worked. Can you share down the board how you kind of developed that plan for yourself?
A plan to transition. So for me, I think I made the decision, I was in Afghanistan, and it was kind of like I knew that unit was going to deploy again. So that would have been my third deployment in 6 years. I said, I want to get out and start a family. So what I did was I started reading books. I heard a lot about manufacturing. I didn't really know what it was. So I know I read The Goal. There was a series of other books that I actually read to just kind of understand, what is Six Sigma, what is Lean, get to know the verbiage that people are using. When you're talking to the companies in the corporate world, because I didn't really know what that was. I had no idea. I remember I was reading something about a purchase order. I didn't know what a purchase order was, so I had to go look it up. But that's the kind of things that I prepared myself when I started interviewing. I actually practiced interviewing with my wife. Once I decided, I want to go into manufacturing, something operational, I actually started practicing interviews with my wife. So I practiced for different companies. I would pull maybe a job position, and I would have her read through it, and then I would try and tailor the skills that I had in the Army specific to that company. And I probably did that about 13 or 14 times with different companies, to the point where I was flexible talking about my skills kind of in like Army speak, but then I could also translate, here's how I was able to drive results and problem solve to a corporate setting. And I think that was really kind of my strategy. And I got lucky. I got to interview with Abiomed, and it just was a great connection. But that's ultimately setting myself up for being able to talk to the corporate world, and being able to demonstrate that I can problem solve was probably the biggest thing for me.
Thanks, Jim.
When I got out, they didn't have, as I said before, all the opportunities, social media, electronic. There was no Indeed. There was no anything like that when I got out in '95. So, but I did have two things that I knew for sure. One was I was going to network. That was the first part of my plan. I kept throughout the years when I was in the service, I kept up with a lot of people, and especially people who got out. I made a point of keeping up with them, so that as I knew I was closer and closer to my getting out myself, I was able to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm going to get out in 6 months or 8 months or 2 months. You made the transition. What did you do? How did you do it? And back then it was pretty much find a job you want, put a resume together, and go out and start to do it. So that was one part of it. The networking was hugely helpful, and I can't even stress that enough. Networking with people that you know that have gotten out, whether it's a career that you think you're going to follow or just something to get you started. The second thing was I was very convinced actually that I wasn't going to settle. Sometimes when you get out, you come to a point where, you know, I've got a family, I've got this, I've got to have an income, so I'll just take whatever comes along. Well, you could do that. It works out for a while, but then you become a little bit dissatisfied and it never works out in the end if you settle. So when you decide what career you want and where you want to go, target that very specifically. Just keep at it. Don't settle for something. I mean, if you have to, you do, but if you don't settle for something that you really don't want, because in the end you won't be happy with it. So find something that you want, go after it, don't settle, and make sure that you network all the way through.
So I knew that I would probably be working for a big organization and going into manufacturing. Don't ask me why I thought that, but it's just, you know, you see what's out there. Maybe it's the money, maybe it's the camaraderie that I had from the service with a large organization. And I tried to set myself up with taking classes, Lean Six Sigma with Villanova, much like Mike, trying to get this nomenclature of the civilian world down. That kind of set me towards that manufacturing goal. And I'm trying to think of all these different things. I tried to be open because I think, you know, a cryptologist, what the heck am I going to do in the civilian world other than work for NSA or work for the government? And really, I honed my skill. Mike talked about during interview and trying to hone that skill, look at a job description and say, how do I transfer my skills? I became very, very efficient at taking a job description and taking my skills in my head and portraying what I did in the military and putting it into that civilian career on that resume. So I have created so many versions of my resume to support those different job descriptions that it's enabled me to look at a wide variety of jobs. I knew I wasn't willing to settle for just anything, but I was open to many different opportunities, probably things I never even dreamed of. So that's how I looked at it.
Awesome. Alex?
Sure. So when I got out, I was still relatively young, and I said, I know I want to go back to college. That was like the major push for me to get out. I was like, I could stay in this, you know, or I could get out and go to college. So I was like, I really want to go to college. I just don't know what and in where and all those. So I had to sit down. I was at my house, my parents' house, and I came up with a bunch of ideas like, what about me looking into this, or that, like different things like mechanical engineering, you know, electrical, like all sorts of things. At one point I was looking at being an architect, and that was really quickly brought down because I realized really quickly that I can't draw. So I would be the worst architect ever. So I started looking at it. Then I started looking at, you know, what do I like? What do I enjoy doing? And I wasn't even thinking about medical. I had no idea, right? So I just sat down and like, well, I know whatever I do, I like building and I like making things. You know, I loved Legos, I love puzzles. And I said, well, Salem State's down the street and they have a computer science program. I was like, I'm probably going to stay home just so I can conserve money and just be a commuter. So I started doing that, and then over time I started really falling in love with that kind of concept, being a computer scientist, but actively going out trying to find internships and just being really proactive. So I'd have my normal day job. I mean, you name it, I did it as a job. I mean, I was working at Bertucci's at like right before a class as a bartender, just to kind of pay for some of my bills as I was going on, trying to live my day-to-day. But I just like, I know I don't want to do this. It's just temporary pain. So just learning and keep going through. And that's like the biggest thing for my transition, is just learning that whatever you do, if you don't like it, it's temporary, because you're going to make yourself better.
No, thanks. I think, you know, some of the common themes in the beginning of the program, you know, we threw up the why. And at the end of it, it equaled, you know, careers and opportunities in the life sciences with meaning and purpose. And what I heard from all the panelists up here was a couple of key themes. One is they understood who they are and where they would best fit. They understood their inner calling and what was going to intrinsically satisfy them. And that's one of the things that as we progress MVPvets forward, and those veterans that are here today and the veterans that are on the panel, I think they all have found that calling in that second career that they can be passionate about and to continue to give back as part of a contributing member of a team here at Abiomed in service to patients to produce better outcomes, And the second part is, that they just don't settle. And if you have to get to that intermediate objective along the way, that's what you got to do. But you persevere at the end. And so I thank you all for sharing. So the final question, and you may have already hit on this as we look to conclude the panel, is if you were to go back in time and say, what would be the one thing that you wish you would have told yourself in preparation that you know now to your fellow colleagues that are in transition at this point in time that you wish you knew? And some of them may resurface. It could be about practicing for interviews or something like that nature. But is there a golden nugget that you would wish to pass on to your fellow servicemen and women out there? So I'll start with Alex.
Sure, mine's easy. Don't listen to the haters. I had a lot of people against me. It's really surprising.
Okay.
Don't sell yourself short of what you can do. The world is out there, and opportunity, even though it's, maybe it's the second part of your life, but there's so much out there available.
For me, it's life is short enough, so make sure that you know what you want to do. Don't do something just for the sake of doing it, because you'll waste a year here, a year there, and pretty soon you'll be, I went in the service, so it was okay, but I know people that they're 30, 35 years old, and they're just now going to settle into what they're going to do when they've lost all those years in their 20s and early 30s, just drifting around from job to job, no focus, no direction. And so for me, my advice is really figure out what it is you want to do and just focus in on that, and let the other stuff just be background.
Yeah, I think for me, the golden nugget I would pass back to myself is, it's going to take 6 months before you feel like you're actually bringing value to the company. And a lot of people kind of know that, you're coming from a totally different world. And so I guess I would have told myself, take that first 6 months and really learn something new every day. Whether it's an easy skill, how to do a transaction, something small, but make it a goal that every day you learn something new, a new skill you didn't have before. And you can actually start doing, certain jobs to help other people, and then they're more willing to help teach you other skills, and you can really build on that.
Yeah, and if I could just
Absolutely.
following up on that,
because we're going to go to Q&A next.
that's one thing that's real important that he said, and it didn't dawn on me till Mike just said it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes you get in the mode of, when you're in the service, you don't want to look weak. You want to do everything yourself. I've got it. I can take care of it. But people I found are more than willing to help you out and give you a hand if you ask. People aren't mind readers. They're not going to know maybe that you need help because you put on this big front. But don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think you'll find that most people that are in a position to help you, they're only too glad to do it.
Yeah, no, Jim, I think that's a great point. I alluded to a little bit earlier about, asking for a hand can be in the military culture. As you transition, a sign of weakness. It's not. It's actually knowing yourself, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and knowing how to bridge that gap. And it's okay. And by asking for assistance, you're actually empowering the other person and showing and deferring respect and expertise to them to make sure that they know that you're a part of their valued network, which actually strengthens a relationship. So don't see it as a weakness. See it as actually a strength that you know yourself, you know what you want, and that you're willing to seek that self-improvement, whether it's through self-development or seeking an expert's advice. So that's a great point. Okay, so turn it over to those in the room, veterans and mentors alike, and any questions that you all have. Go ahead, Patrick.
Just a quick question about a couple of you mentioned really determining what you want to do and before you do anything, really, is what it sounded like. Can you talk a little bit about the process that you went through in order to narrow things down? I know from my own experience, I feel like I've got such a broad range of things that I've done in my career so far. It's hard for me to figure out what I really want to do to specialize. So I'm interested to hear what your perspectives are on how you would go about doing that.
Yeah, I guess I could go first. I guess I always look back at like what I did in the Army and what like excited me. And for me, it was like operations, like current operations. I love current operations. I love leading a platoon. When I was on staff, like I loved doing that. And so I said, okay, what is similar to that? And I said, okay, well, manufacturing looks similar. I don't know enough about it. And I actually went on a couple interviews to, just manufacturing jobs, just to see what the floor looks like, get a sense for the position. And I even went on interviews to, positions I wasn't sure I wanted, but I wanted to know more about. So you can actually use that to your advantage if they bring you into that company to get to know more about, what it is and what it's like.
My process was thinking about what I wanted to do that would, when I woke up in the morning, I couldn't wait to get to work. I couldn't wait to get to work. It's something I love to do. Now I'm in a position where there are days I come to work here and wish I was 20 years younger. So that's, and I know that's kind of a cliche and a general answer, but if you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 choices and you want to narrow it down, try to pick the one that's something that is going to get you excited to go to work every day. That's the one you want.
Yeah, and if you get there and you interview and it doesn't excite you, like you don't take the job. If you don't leave that and you're like, I could see myself coming here every day and this is going to be great, then it's not for you.
I think it's finding the passion in the things you like. And kind of to summarize what Jim said, Mike, about just passion, wanting to come to work, loving what you're doing. A job is not a job if you love what you're doing, kind of thing. It doesn't feel like a job. How about that? Pursue those.
Mine was more about hobbies. What do I like doing? I like solving puzzles. So engineering was a direct match. So if you could think one level higher than, say, what should I do my career in, but kind of say, what do I like to do on the side for fun if I'm not working, no matter what I'm doing? And then trying to correlate that. Because then at least you're saying, I have a general interest in for me, I have a general interest in solving puzzles, and I like making them really challenging. And I don't mind spending hours or days or months trying to solve it. That was like, okay, so what's related to that? What field is related to that? And that's how I made the correlation.
Bill?
Can I add just one?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So to add to that, just as from personal experience, I would say, don't be afraid to take the plunge and then reassess. Career guy, retired, thought I wanted to be a teacher. My last billet was teaching. Went through the whole process. I got my MTEL certification, certified history teacher, 5 through 12. Had a job teaching at a college. It was all great until I realized all this effort, it's not really what I thought it was going to be. It ended up being kind of an admin grind that I just spent my entire, the second half of my career doing exactly that. So certainly do everything you need to do to take the plunge, find your passion, but don't be afraid to be pigeonholed, or don't become pigeonholed just because you tried something and you found out after the fact it wasn't necessarily a perfect fit. I would say through this mentoring group and through this networking group, there are other options out there, and have the courage to self-assess and say, I'm not quite happy as I thought I would be. Maybe it's time to try something else.
Yeah, I think something you touched on, Bill, was a great point, and kind of goes back to the mentoring part. You have such an array of mentors across industries here and you think you know what you know about yourself, and sometimes, as we talk about even the MVP process, the first step we recommend is a self-assessment to find out what actually is inside that makes you tick beyond wearing the uniform, and what's going to motivate, drive, and inspire you. Because if you are inspired, and as Jim talked about, you wish you were younger, you just want to jump and run to work every single day because you've got that much more that same passion and meaning, then it isn't a job, and it's not the Bill Belichick motto of just do your job. It's not. It's you're doing it because you love it, and that's where the real meaning is. And you can find that by just reaching out and asking and talking to a mentor for all their different perspectives. Because chances are you're going to find one that's like, yeah, and maybe you just didn't know it, and they're going to kind of frame it in a different way. And so, again, I can't stress enough, when we're finished with the panels, continue and then go online and find an additional match and reach out and ask those exact questions of the mentors within the program. Okay, you've got time for one more question, and then we'll go on a short break, because I know we didn't really break after the tour, and then we'll reset for the next panel. Anton.
Doesn't work. Alex,
Yes.
you said you worked with ammunition, right?
Munitions, yep.
What did you put on your resume as a skill that's coming from the military that is related to the industry? I would assume one would be that they're both highly regulated industries, right? But
Yes.
is there something else you could like sort of?
Sure, yep. So a few things. So from the regulation standpoint, I forget the keyword of what it was, but we had to deal with documentation every day, and I was in charge of ensuring that documentation was up to spec, and I would call people out on it. So I was, always made sure. So that gave me kind of that intuition, like, okay, I know what regulation means, so I put that down. In addition to that, it's always about following orders in a way, right? Like, someone asks for something, I will follow your orders with it. Just let me go through these steps. I will talk to you about it, but this is what I know what you want at the end. Is that correct? So learning about that was another thing. And then logistics, how to move things. Now, logistics mostly means about moving things internally here, but guess what? I can move things in my mind too. And that's where I can kind of say, like, I'm going to move software components, if you will, in my mind in the same kind of comprehension. Like, this will be over here because this is where it lands, this is where it belongs. It's best fit here.
Sue? I know you addressed it to Alex, but I'd be interested, from a SP standpoint, from a cryptologist standpoint, and an artilleryman standpoint, if you don't mind.
I think mine is not necessarily cryptology related, but just overall. You always want to make things better, continuous improvement. You always want the quickest route, a process, a built process where I can continually improve that. And in the military, you do that all the time. I mean, you're looking for the best result, whether it's using like an AAR or something of that sort. Through audit findings, you're always making yourself better. And I think you can translate directly into a resume.
I think it's, especially if you have a skill set that there's no civilian counterpart to it, I think what you want to do is figure out a way to explain how doing that job for however long you did it would impact a prospective employer. What does my skill set, or what I've learned with that, bring to the company? How can I impact, at this job, how can I impact the company in a significant and positive way?
Yeah, coming over from artillery, I think there was a lot of technical things that I was able to focus on and show that I could problem solve technically. So I kind of had worked in like a vignette about, okay, here's how there was the gun line, and I was able to basically sit back to figure out what the problem was and get it fixed. And that kind of just showed that I was willing to kind of get my jump in and then get that technical problem solved. And I think that translated to the engineering side.
So thanks for the question. And I'll just kind of surmise, I think that whether it's ammunition or systems and processes, to get to the specific question for Alex, regulatory affairs and compliance, quality control and assurance. You've just got to look at it through a different lens. And this kind of gets to, the mentor discussion that we had last night, and with Abiomed's HR team, not to steal their thunder, because you're going to hear from the recruiters and you're going to hear from the hiring managers after this panel concludes. But this is why after this, if there are questions on how to tailor that resume, and Sue talked about that. She mastered the tailoring of her resumes to fit the skills, knowledge, and ability she gained in the military to kind of pivot to whatever job that she thought might fit within her, the passion that she had and how she wanted to contribute to that team. And the HR team is willing to sit down, because if there's one thing I've heard from young veterans like yourself over and over again, it's, well, I'm a mechanic. I don't know how that has anything to do, but you're actually, as I shared with the vignette over, you maintain 12, F-818 Hornets, which are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And there's a lot of regulation, and there's a lot of compliance, and there's a lot of safety, just some key words and systems and processes that go into that. It's just framing that in words on a piece of paper to get across. And then it's also, as we talk about the interview next, it's being able to effectively communicate that in a short story within 30 seconds or less to sell yourself. And that's very difficult for a veteran, because generally we're humble. But the team's willing to sit down after that panel and during some of the mentor and follow-on discussions to help work that, because it doesn't matter if you're a mechanic, an infantryman, an MP, a combat engineer, we all have that angst over, I don't know how this is going to apply. So great question. So that being said, if you join me in a round of applause for Mike, Jim, Sue, and Alex.